product as directors is really going to be dependent on what we put into it before the scores go to our ringers. And from my perspective is, I want the music to be worship for the congregation and just not the notes. And so this is a strategy that I work with so that I can prepare the music. And it's in a sense, it's almost like we have a quasi-Bible study as we are working on the piece of music, because it's important to me that the ringers know exactly not only what the music is saying, but where it is communicating it and how it is communicating it. And so I just selected something easy that we can read that really shows an interpretation of making that happen. But I just want to mention a few things as a preface to that, is that when you're creating your rehearsal dialogue, some things to remember is that being consistent at every rehearsal is going to make the best use of your time and also build the musical skill base that you need. It's not a matter of, let's try these measures this way this week and let me think about it, and then we do something different next week, and then I'll let you know the week after that. I mean, that is just not going to be good continuity, and the ringers are not going to enjoy that, because I go back to the fact that ringing is a muscle training instrument. And so I know by the time I go into the first rehearsal how I want a passage to be done, because I know the muscles have to be trained from the beginning, or I will spend too much time trying to correct something weeks down the road. So consistency is really, really important. Preparation of skills, especially for beginning ringers. If there are techniques that the ringers don't know, don't let them sight read it. Teach them the skill first. Use an excerpt from the piece. This is where the echo happens. This is how we do the echo. Let's practice the echo. Now let's sight read the measure before the echo, and then here's the echo. And then incorporate it into your rehearsal plan. So don't just let them sight read into something that they've never seen before, or it's just gonna crash and burn and come to a screeching halt. The other thing that's really important for me is nurturing listening. It is so easy, especially with this instrument, for the ringers to feel like robots. I'm the director, I'm the dictator in charge, you just got to do what I tell you to do. I want to encourage ringers to listen beyond the notes that they have responsibility for. And very often in rehearsal, when I stop for something, I will say to them, why did I stop? Rather than tell them right away that I stopped. Because they enjoy being the first one to identify the reason that I stopped. And I know when I start getting those answers that they're starting to listen to each other rather than to what just they are doing, and we're able to build teamwork a lot faster and more expressively that way. And then the fifth one is being realistic. How much time do I really have to prepare this music for Advent, Thanksgiving, special request services, Mother's Day? Yeah, I'd love to pull all these level 5 pieces off the rack and take them home, but is that realistic? No. Maybe a level 4 or 3 plus every now and then for my church ringers, but as much as I'd love to do that level 5, it's just not practical right now, unless I just get it and we just do a section of it this year. And the next year, we learn another section of it. You know, you get your mileage out of your music that way. But be realistic about what you feel that can be attained, so that it's not a frustration for yourself, as well as for the ringers that don't feel like that, oh, I just can't do it. So make it palatable. All right, so those are my prerequisites. As far as score study, again, I mentioned find all the problems and challenges in the music before the ringers do, so that you can be prepared to offer those. Make wise bell assignments. And I know this can be an area of discrepancy, but I do rotate my ringers to various positions. And I put ringers where they need to be in terms of strength of the ensemble. If I have a really crackerjack ringer and EF4 is not very busy, then that ringer is not going to enjoy being there. But But if I put that ringer in DE5, which I know is going to anchor the piece, then that's where they're going to go because it's going to come together faster. Now, they don't necessarily know that, but I know that. And they just have to have an understanding up front that we're going to trade and we're going to swap around, and the left hand is always going to be the space, and the right hand is always going to be the line. All right, at least within that 3-octave range perspective. So we can talk about that individually if you have some personal issues with that. But I do believe in rotation. It also strengthens you. But when you rotate, don't move them just to a neighboring position. In other words, don't take someone that's on F and G5 and just move them to AB5. Because that'll just make skip at least one slot or one position up so that they remember where they're going to be. Okay? All right. So know your music well enough for the first rehearsal that you're not stuck in your music. Because I need to be watching what my ringers are doing from the very get-go. Even though they're buried in the music, I need to be able to see, again, how they're coordinating their muscles with the ringing so that I can catch things early rather than 6 weeks from now I realize that Holly, oh, if I had just told her that she could put this F sharp in this other hand, that would fix her problem. Those kinds of things. All right. So when I'm studying a score, and feel free to ask at any point, I break my score analysis up into 4 categories. The first one is form. And you don't have to have a music degree to figure this out. You can do it from listening to recordings of the pieces that you're working on. But what form involves in, and why it is so important for me, is that is the study of where are all the similar pieces of music. If I use the form, like there's going to be an introduction of 4, 8 measures or so, 16 measures. So I isolate that, I call that, and I write it in my score, or on a sticky note. Introduction, measures 1 through 8. Then I'll look at measure, like if it's an arrangement of a verse, of a hymn. Okay, this is the first verse. Where's the next verse? And I find that next verse. How is it treated? Is it the same as the first verse, or is it different? Where's the third verse? Is there a third verse? And oftentimes, in a lot of writings, the beginning will be simply stated, and the ending will have lots of texture, lots of notes in the chords. So by the time that I have discovered where the like material is, I've got it all boxed up. So that I might have in form 9 through 15 is the same as 46 to 50. And I just line it up. So that helps me plan my rehearsal. When I'm working from form, then I don't necessarily start from measure 1 and play to the end. For me, that is a waste of time. I start where the music is at its densest, where it has the most chords, which is often the end. I'll do that section first. Then I'll say, okay, now we're going to hop to the beginning where we have this same material, and we're going to play it here. And the reason I do that is because I want to build muscle memory on the same material. It has nothing to do with, let's see if we can play from the beginning to the end. It's all about the muscle memory, and especially for amateurs, I want to reinforce what they've just done so that once we do play from measure 1 all the way through, we're playing into music that we have already done before, and it's not all brand new from beginning to end. Does that make sense? I will show you how that works. So that's how I use my form. The second category on the next page, technical problems. This is where I go through and assess bell changes, cautionary signs, key changes, publishing errors, technique changes, other places where we need to go from bells to chimes. Anything that might present a surprise to the ringers. I itemize those and decide, okay, how much of a surprise is this going to be based on where the ringers are. And if there is a key change that I notice about for the third verse or the second verse, it may be that I wait a couple of weeks to do that second verse because it's in a different key and different notes, and I want them to get really comfortable with the verse in the same key first. You know, all those kinds of things. Rhythm, I make note of where there is a different rhythm that may not be comfortable for them, so that if there is a challenging rhythm, especially if I'm introducing like triplets or dotted rhythms, we isolate that and we practice those rhythms first. And it's not so much that we practice them on the bells, but I would have them perhaps practice it playing it into the phone, or even using mallets and malleting into the phone. Again, I'm getting the muscle memory. The brain understands that it's a triplet or a dotted note, but it takes the coordination of the brain telling the muscles what to do before it's going to happen. And I really try to train the muscles at the same time. The fourth category is musical, and a lot of times this is my longest list. It's the areas in the music where, one, I decide the sermon in the music. What is the story? An arrangement of a hymn that perhaps has 3 verses might have as many as 8 verses in the hymnal. So I will study the verses in the hymnal. I will compare it to how it's arranged in the music and decide which verses apply, at least from my perspective. It could be totally different from anyone else. But I just make selective choices, and I will go to the extent of I will write the verse once I make the decision in my music, so that I am always reminded of what that section is going to communicate, because very soon I'm going to be sharing that with the ringers. This is the verse about, sort of thing. So I make all those kinds of decisions. If there are changes about dynamics, and we'll look at some of those where some changes might be necessary, any musical change, the score itself is just a blueprint, and you need to give yourselves permission to make the modifications and adjustments that suit what you want the music to communicate for your congregations. And sometimes there are just mistakes that get out there. So making those lists. Okay, so working on down to the bottom of the page to where I have form, this is what I have analyzed for the Lamb piece that we're going to work on today. Introduction is measure 1 through 4. I have the verse notated, and then I have the coda. Then I listed the potential techniques that could be there. I made note of a syncopated rhythm that I would probably need to give some attention to. And then look at my list of musicality on the next page. Way longer than anything else that's previous to that. Then I have a section just for your review that lists what could be new skills that might have to be prefaced. What I want to jump into now is actually taking you through how I would rehearse this piece, introducing it for the first time, and sort of the thought process that I go through in sharing my music with them, that it can become worship for the ringers as well as for the congregation. All right? So these extra notes in here are things you can go back and think about and apply as it works to you. But what I'm looking at now, the rehearsal sequence at bottom of 3, which is where we're going to start. So I've just handed this piece out, and we're doing it for the first time. We're not going to start at measure 1. We may not even start at measure 1 until next week. All right, we're going to start on page 6. At measure 54, and I'll talk a little bit about the piece. As I was making my study of this particular piece, I also ordered a choral arrangement of it. It's not something that you can sing with this arrangement, but I wanted to study the choral arrangement to give me a perspective on how I might interpret the actual piece itself. So looking at measure 54, the very first adjustment that I made is beginning on beat 4 with a B flat 5 and B flat 6. What's the dynamic level? Yeah. Is it possible to kind of do that with only 2 notes? Not easily. So I have a 5-octave set. So the first thing I do is says we're going to add B flat 4 and B flat 3. We're going to fill that chord out so it has more of an opportunity to be fortissimo rather than just those 2 notes in the treble. Kind of beef it up. So that's the addition that we made. The melody is in the treble, so I make sure everyone knows where the melody is. There's the syncopated rhythm in 57, and I would just take a few minutes and just pat that out on the table. Do we need to do that? All right. Let's just pretend. At 57, just pad on the rhythm, pretending that you're playing that syncopated melody above the quarter notes. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 4. All right. So we've got that syncopated rhythm in our heads. And that part of the music really needs to be brought out because it's playing mostly on offbeats, and a lot of times it's only 1 or 2 notes. So if it doesn't have confidence with it, it's going to sound tentative and perhaps sound like, oh, maybe this is a mistake. So it has to be with lots of authority for that rhythm, and those notes really need to play out very, very full. It's not just about the melody that's on top. The other thing that I will point out is the top of page 7. In measure 63, in the treble up stem, those are repeated chords for all 4 beats, and they are melody. Just play measure 63 for me at the top of 7, and you need 3 flats, B, E, and A, and we're in 4/4. 3 and 4 and. Good. Those notes were exactly right, but now we need to put the music in the notes. Now think about your experiences with other instruments. When you have a repeated chord in another instrument, how do you articulate the repeated chords, the repetition of material?
Either getting louder or softer.
Exactly, exactly. So handbells is the same way. When we have repeated chords, each one you have to know where you're going. So in this case, the phrase is going to 64. So in playing those repeated quarter notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, the phrase needs to grow. So the ringers know that they will restrike on each beat in a different place and have a faster follow-through of the stroke. Do you all know what I mean? I know I've talked about this in other sessions. All right? So let's play 63. You're going to 64, so that's going to be your tallest and fastest stroke. And let me know if I'm using terminology. Go, what are you talking about? All right, 63. Ready? And. 1, 2, 3. Sound would you rather hear? The second one, the way we start with it. And so early on, first sight reading, I point out the places where we have to have a musicality and the growth. Again, because it's a muscle training instrument. And if I let the ringers go for a month and not do something with those 4 repeated chords, I'll never get it. Okay? So I pick that kind of stuff out from the very beginning. All right, now, let's go ahead and look at the very last measure at 75. And this is I'm talking to you as I would my ringers. What is the situation in 75? Yeah, pianissimo, and what else? It's got about 600 notes in it. And in fact, that final chord, which is pianissimo, subito piano, pardon me, has more notes in it than any other chord in the entire piece. And it's the softest chord in the piece. Hello? We got a problem here, or a musical problem, so we have to decide how we're going to do that last chord. So I'll start with, let me see how quietly you can ring that last chord, knowing that we've got 600 notes in it, and it's the softest chord of the whole piece. All right? 2, 3, 4. that in the vault. Absolutely. If I were to let you sight read that without going through that little discussion from 72, do you think that chord would have been that soft first time through? No. Absolutely not. All right? But we took a little bit of time to hone in on that, and you guys got it right. Wow, exactly the first time. So that's exactly what we need to have there. Another option would be, though, if for some reason the ringers did not have the control that you have, is that you could change that to a suspended mallet sound, where you could really control that soft dynamics. But you just proved to me that we don't have to do that. Okay? So sight read from 72 to the end, and when we get to that 600 note chord, play it just as you did that time. And this time after we ring it, we're going to put an amen on that chord, meaning that after we've played the chord softly, you're right, I'll give the indication, we'll do a vibrato, we'll take it down, table damp it on the table, and we'll just kind of bring our heads down a little bit to add that amen. All right? 72. This is the sight reading first rehearsal in this piece. 3, 4, 72. 2, 3, just hold it there. So without having read the whole piece, we have just communicated worship by the way we have altered the ending. Okay? And how we end the piece is the lasting impression that we will give to the congregation about the spirit of what's just happened. And in this particular instance, I will go ahead and tell you, this last verse, pick up to 55, is resurrection verse. It is the resurrection. And so when we finally get to the ending at 75, we're there. We are at that peace. We know that's where we're all going to go. And amen. All right? So, you know the flavor of the last piece? We'll talk about it. I'll share the text. But basically the text is, he rose, my heart with thanks now overflows. That's the gist of the text. I mean, I have the rest of it written in there, but I'll save time for right now. So we'll talk about that text. Then when I come back to this in the future, I will say, we're not going to start at measure 55. I will say, we're going to start at the resurrection. I get away from measure numbers as quickly as I can because I want them to internalize and know exactly where in the music certain messages are happening.
Would you have them write in their music? Would you have them put resurrection?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Unless they can remember it.
Yeah.
I mean, I figure a short pencil is better than a long memory.
Like she said, reason.
All right. So now we've talked about this as the verse of resurrection. We have the ending. We know that we're going to put this amen on it. Now we're going to sight read the verse. We've already talked about how we're going to grow the phrase on repeated notes so that it goes to 64. So then the first time that we play through this, it's going to have a lot more of the right stuff to it than if we just said, okay, we're going to start here and play to the end. See what happens. See where I'm going? Okay, so let's start with 54, beat 4. And I know you can't write on this, but I added B flat 3 and B flat 4 just to kind of beef up this fortissimo sound a little bit. And I will go under tempo so that you can look ahead, not to worry about it. 1, 2, 3, 4. come down to the table, make sure nothing is left at the shoulder. All bells come down to the table. So we have that unison amen with everything down. All right, good. The other thing that I would make, if I had a 5-octave choir and everybody was doing the doublings up with the Shelley, I would say we're not going to double up in measure 73. Leave out the D7 and the E flat 7s there, because that's going to make it too loud based on where we're going. So the Shelley rings go, "Aw, darn." But to be true to what the story is doing, it's just inappropriate to all of a sudden, da-da-da, and then everything comes down and quietly. So give yourself permission, once you've decided on the musical sermon, what the story's going to be, to take out those kinds of things if it's appropriate. Alrighty?
Okay, I have a question.
Absolutely.
Shelley?
Shelley. Oh, okay. That's ringing 2 bells at the same time.
Okay.
So like in 73, it would be E flat 6 and E flat 7 being rung together. Troubles, once they learn to do that, they love to do it, but I wouldn't let them do it in this piece, because it would just make it too loud for where we need to go at that perspective.
So you're saying the B flat and the C and the bass should not be, it's too loud, is that what you're saying?
No, it's okay. It's okay. What I'm talking about is in 73 on the last beat, where the E flat 6 is doubled up the octave,
I see.
and where the D6 is doubled up the octave, I would take out that upper octave, because it just makes it too loud for where I want to go with it at this point. Okay,
You do play on 74 though, that first beat,
yes, but not the upper 7.
not the upper one, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would take all those 7s out, because it's just going to distract. Now, I included in 75 in the last chord, but that's all right. Okay, and so depending on what else I wanted to rehearse, that might be all that I do on that piece, that rehearsal. And the ringers will say, "Oh, can we go now?" It's like, "No, next week." Next week. And part of it is psychological, because I want them, the ringers, to look forward to coming back to something that we're working on. I don't want to give it all away. I don't want to overload them with a lot of new material. I want to just work. This is about the resurrection. Get this really solid. Talk about that. Get the musical concepts there. Then we'll go on to the next piece. All right? So, next week, we come back to this. We'll play the resurrection verse again, and I will say, we're going to start at the resurrection rather than number 55. So we've done that. Then the new material is on page 5. And in measure 38, beat 4, this is technically the verse of the crucifixion. And I will sight read through this, and then I'll share with you why I felt that this was about crucifixion. All right, so just reading for now.
Where are we?
On 38, and we will turn the page. There is one chord that finishes this section at the top of 50. It's an awful place for a page turn to finish the phrase at the top of the next page. But the crucifixion section ends with that fermata chord at 50. We'll start in 38. Suspended ballad for the upper treble, so make sure you have those in your hand. The melody is in the bass, and I will tell you up front that instead of mezzo forte, I would like the bass to be forte, and you'll know why in a moment. But let's just read it for now, like 38, 2, 3, 4 flats. 1, 2, 3. And string down. 41. 42. 43. where Jesus says, "It is finished." And I interpret it that way because there's a fermata there. And once I tell you about what precedes that, it will be very obvious. So when we play, "It is finished," it will be rung, and the bells will all go up to like a Statue of Liberty. And we're going to leave it there for a while and offer up Jesus' Spirit. And all of the sins that He bore for us are going with it. All right, so let's just do "It is finished" chord.
So if we don't have a note, you want me to turn it sideways
Yes,
and go with it?
thank you. And if you don't have anything written to play in that chord, participate. And so everyone participates in "It is finished." Thank you. Just
one chord.
just one note in each hand. You don't have to have your hands absolutely gobbed full, but as long as everyone is participating in the chord, whether you're written or not. So here's "It is finished," and we go up and listen, and we're just going to stay there for a while, and then we'll slowly bring it down to the shoulder, and then we'll hold it, and then we'll go on to the next section. All right? So, "It is finished" chord.
Question,
Yes.
I have E flat and F6, and some of those measures where we're, whatever you call it, suspended
Uh-huh.
not, do I put down and pick up, or do I hold both bells?
Hold both.
And what's that?
Hold them like a Shelley.
That's what I don't.
So, okay, so you have the two bells in the same hand and two mallets in the other hand if you need it. But don't put them together.
Don't.
Lay them on top of each other. So the way I do this, and if you're not familiar with this, the bell that would be the left-hand bell. Okay, that one's going to be your left-hand bell. So just put it on top. No, I'll wait for you to light. You're going to put it on the bottom because that's the one you want to get rid of. Okay. So the bell whose hands it belongs into is going to stay. But you need to add another bell to it. Add it to the bottom to do the malleting. Because when you put the mallets down, you take this one away, and your primary bell is still in your hand. Then you don't have to switch. Yeah, underneath and an out. So hold your primary bell. Yeah, put your index finger in between. Yes, lay them on the table. Yeah, lay them on the table. That's easy. Yeah. Okay, very, very good. All right, so back on page 5, I'm going to show you why I am calling this a crucifixion verse and why I justify it as such. In the bass, I'm changing the dynamic level to forte. You'll notice that starting on the third beat of 38, it's a duet line. The melody is the top note. E flat, C, 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 B flat, C, B flat, A flat, B, C, D, C. You see where that's going? That's the melody of this tune. It's a parallel harmony with it. And so when I saw that, my interpretation immediately was Jesus was not alone, even when he was on the cross. His heavenly Father was with him because of that duplication of that melody all the way through. And he's always going to be with us, no matter what adversity befalls our life, because he was with his Son throughout his final days. So that's why, for me, this is the crucifixion verse. And because of the suspended mallets over on the top, for me, those suspended mallets represent the guardian angels that are waiting to receive him when he comes to join his Father. Yeah. Okay? So that's where we have our little Bible study moment here. And yeah, we do. So when I come back to this piece next week, we're not at 39. We're going to play the crucifixion section. Okay? So let's do that now. Starting right on the crucifixion.
Are you on the fourth beat of that measure?
What?
Yes, I am. Very good.
Four.
So think, guardian angels, you're not gonna be going, stunning the bells. It's gonna be very gentle, lifting it out. And for those of you that are carrying the melody, it's very full. It's Jesus with his Father, being with him all the way to the end, where Jesus finally declares, it is finished. Okay? Got it?
You have to pick up the 39.
Yes. All right, I'll count to 3. 1, 2, 3. Stop right there for the moment. Okay? Good, good. What happens at the bottom of 5, from 46 to 47, the melody transfers from that middle voice up into the treble. So it's the top note of this melody. There is still duplication underneath. So God the Father is still with his Son. All right? It's just got some fuller chords going into the it is finished. But it needs to feel like, pardon this analogy, that the frisbee is being tossed from the middle bells up to the trebles. And so you players up there, A flat 6, B flat 6, need to know that you now have that melody. And so strike and use and let it stand out a little bit more, because there's lots of notes underneath of you. So we hear that melodic transfer. Okay, you'll notice that I'm, even in the sight reading stage, that I'm not giving measure numbers very often. And that's intentional, because if I go through a rehearsal and give measure numbers, it's giving the ringers permission not to watch. And so while it's certainly okay at the beginning, and with different levels of beginning ringers, I think it's appropriate and helpful. But try to get away from that as soon as you can. Otherwise, you will never get their eyes up here where it belongs from their music. And all that the congregation will see is their foreheads watching the notes go by. All right?
Well, that may be all right for some of these people, but see, for me, I need to know exactly where you are right there. So
Oh, yeah.
I'm at the very bottom level, where these people are at the top level.
No, I wouldn't say it that way. No, I wouldn't say that way at all. Wouldn't say that way at all. But we'll have various junctions where I will want to spend more time. And if Lottie there never checks in with me, because I've always counted where the measure numbers are, she's going to continue to run the red lights. Okay? So I just mentioned it, and the reason I can share this with you is because I've been there and done that. I've been the measure counting queen, and then you take that away, it's like, ah! All
I
right.
have Lottie in my choir too.
I wasn't pick, I don't know. I was just having fun with her because we've had some conversation earlier. All right, so this rehearsal probably I might do that. I'd review the resurrection verse. I would add the crucifixion verse. All right. We still haven't done the whole thing. We're going into the 3rd week. And all of this is reflecting in my form that I've done. I know where all the verses are. I've done my score study. I've looked at the verses in the choral arrangement, and I've decided which verses apply to this piece, because there are more choices. Okay.
So this is your 3rd week of 5 weeks, or how many weeks?
Oh, I don't know. It would depend. Probably, I don't know, at least 6 or so. Yeah, and there's sometimes, and initially it made my ringers nervous, But sometimes there are instances where I don't actually run the whole thing until we're getting really, really close to worship Sunday. But it always comes together because we spent enough time building the musicality, the concepts, the sermon and the music, the details, and it's just a matter of putting the chunks in. And most of the time I work from back to front because I always want the ringers to be able to play into what they've already know. And that just builds more confidence rather than everything feeling like it's new every time they come back to it. Okay, so the next verse is on page 3, where the hand chimes are notated. And basically this verse is Jesus as the Lamb of God. Very, very simply, Jesus is the Lamb of God. And the melody is carried on the hand chimes. There is similarity in measure 29 going into 30. 29 to 30 is exactly like 63 to 64. So what's common about those two?
Repeated times.
Absolutely. See how this happens? All right. So just be aware of that. The chimes are going to be passing the melody off to the trebles at that junction. Let's sight read Jesus is the Lamb of God. In measure 20, again, beat 3. And so that I can allow for the ringers to change instruments, I would put a fermata on the E flat 5 of the third beat, just to buy a little bit of extra time there before we start the fourth beat. So there's a little bit of time to change to the hand chimes. Because E flat bell to E flat chime happens fairly soon. So we'll start right at the beginning of 20, just to make the transition. 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3, 4. No, run red lights. 1, 2, and 22 and 2 and 3. Okay, so we're in C major now. So I should have mentioned that. Get rid of your flats. For the most part, this is all C major belts. And in 20, third beat, add the fermato. I mean, I know you can't do that right now in this. So right now, I will count that one. So don't come in too soon for beat 4, because I want to give the ringers a chance to switch to their chimes. And it's musically justified as well. All right, at 20. 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3. 1. We stopped at the crucifixion. Yes, thank you very much. And the guardian angel were just a little bit too out there. They need to be more like guardians and not pick-me. Okay? Good, good. Oh, you're all great. Okay.
Okay, I have another question.
Absolutely.
Sorry to keep bugging you.
No, you're not bugging me at all.
No, excuse me, 38 to 39.
Yep.
I've got to ring the F and then put it in that Shelley position.
Yes.
How do I do that?
Okay. Start to do that as soon as you have rung the F in 38.
And then just
Yep.
void, okay.
Yep. And just hook it together. Like that connection. Now, if you're not comfortable setting it up in the Shelley, another way that you could do it, is to ring hook it. While it's still suspended, it's rung. Just turn it over and hook it on your bottom pinky.
That was a lot easier, but how do you do it the other way? Because you said left hand and put this underneath,
Yeah.
yes?
Yeah, but you
So-
can.
As you're ringing this, then
Yes.
I don't know what to do with my fingers. Is that right? Is
Yeah,
that
yeah, just like that. Perfect.
okay?
Yeah. But if it's also easier, you can also
So much easier.
pinky it. And
just-
then you can take it off a lot faster. Now, it does mean that you have to have 2 mallets in the other hand. Now, possibly if they ring at the same time. I don't remember exactly. Maybe you
This is
don't.
so slow.
Okay. All right. Yep, there's always multiple ways. And you can also use ring hooks to help you through a page turn. If you have like an LV passage, and you've got bills in both hands, just hook the one that still needs to be ringing as a pinky, turn your page, and then take it back. And problem is solved there. Okay? I see that some of you have been doing that before. All right.
Good idea, though.
All right. All right, here we go. Okay. So there is the first verse. And likely when I introduce the second verse, then I would go ahead and go into the crucifixion verse and play the resurrection verse and tie those verses together so that we have the continuity. I'm just trying to save a little bit of time with you now. But I'm still referring to my rehearsal sequence that I have written, that I have in your notes at the bottom of 3. Okay, so verse 1, tell me, where is it, you know? Yep, good, good. So it starts with, actually technically, the pick up to 5, the G6, going to F6. Yep, and this particular verse is the scripture where the lamb, where Abraham is willing to sacrifice his son, but the lamb is provided instead. Okay, so that's what this first verse is about. So the text is, the lamb, oh Father, where's the sacrifice? God will provide the lamb of the price. Worthy is the lamb whose death makes me his own. The lamb is reigning on his throne. And then that leads into Jesus as the Lamb of God for the second verse. All right? But primarily this is that sacrificial verse where the lamb was provided. Okay. So musically we have a few issues here because the melody is so high in the register. And, well, I'll tell you what. Let's just play measure 4 and you'll see what I mean. Just start reading measure 4 a little bit and we'll talk about it. 3, 4, and... that's a place where I'm gonna take more time anyway. So I'll practice stopping there, so we get used to taking some time there. Alrighty, good for you. I'm very proud of you, what you did from 13 to 14. Did you realize what you had done? Yeah, it was gorgeous. You grew that melody so beautifully. And it's in 13, is worthy is the Lamb. That's what the text is at that point. And you communicated that very well. All right, since this is the very beginning of the piece, it's the first time we actually get the melody. So I'd like to bring it out just a little bit more. And so the way that happens is, we've talked about those of you that were with me earlier in the day. Thank you for putting up with me so long. When melodies need to stand out, for those of you that were in my team building thing, what needs to happen to the melody? Yep, play it from a higher position and use a slightly faster follow through to keep it musical. So in the G6 and E6, in that tuber note, dum 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 dee dum. So just add some velocity to the follow through the stroke and you'll be beautiful there. Musically, I want to take a stretch through measure 8, so I will count that through in measure 8. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. One of my musical philosophies, especially when I want to nurture a spirit of feeling of worship, is I don't give the congregation what they want to hear when they want to hear it. You know what I'm saying that? I stretch phrases. I'm unpredictable. I don't give them the downbeats when they want to hear it. I'll hang on to it just a little bit longer, and then they will go with me. And mentally they will be with me, and emotionally they will be with me. For the introduction of this piece, rather than just playing, well, just do the introduction for me. And well, I'll put the first verse to it in a minute, because I want to make sure I get to all of this with you before I have to let you go. Measure 1. I'll just play the notes for you. Yes, good. Absolutely correct. The notes were perfect. Let's add some emotion. Yeah, you're right. You're right. So it's LV. The LV is written in the middle of the stave, so that means it applies to everything for those of you that are beginning and just kind of getting used to it. So look at those rests in measure 1 in the bass. Ignore the rests because LV is queen. And that LV continues over 2 measures. So nothing damps for those first 2 measures.
Second measure is LV also?
Yes.
Same melody.
Yes. So everything continues to sound until the downbeat of 3, and that's where you damp to start the phrase again. And then likewise, in measure 3, it's LV. Actually, technically, I think an LV was left out in measure 5. So that's an edit that I would give. And I know you can't mark in your music, but that's an example of the LV overriding the rest. Okay, so to make music and to add little crescendo things, for me, again, I've talked about in the technique class, LV is played out over the table. So if you have your weight on the front foot, push the bells towards the 3rd beat. It's not just 1 and 2 and 3, but it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So 3, the E flat 5, wants to be the tallest stroke in that bar so that it gets the musical emphasis. And then as you're working out of measure 1, take the weight off of your front foot to your back foot. And that will automatically create a musical nuance. You know what I'm talking about? Okay, give it a try. Wear it on, and let's take it for a spin. So in measure 2, then I'm going to stretch the 3rd beat. I'm going to hang on to the 3rd beat quarter note and the 4th beat quarter note. I will dictate those. All right. And in measure 4, because we're still in LV mode, I want that to crescendo, so we prepare for the first statement of the melody. Make sense? All right. chance for remembering what you can, realizing that I know you can't write all this in. Here we go, measure 1. And 1. Over to the table, 2. 2 and 3, 4, 1. 2 towards the third beat. Crescendo, 2 and 3. And stop. Okay? And I'll stop often on that third beat of 20 just because I want to build in the fact that I'm doing the fermata there before I go into the second verse. All right? So now, you have the sermon in the music. You know where the places are. We've spent, a week focusing on each of those verses. We'll put the whole thing together. Now, preparation for the beginning of the piece. And someone was asking me about starting a piece and how you pick up your bells and all that kind of stuff. For me, picking up the bells is how you set the mood for the worship and the message. It's just not, okay, we got our bells, pick them up, 1, 2, 3, 4, start. That doesn't really set up a worshipful beginning. But if we start the bells from the table, and we bring the bells up slowly, and I'll show you a couple of ways this one can work. This is one way this one can work. Pick your bells up no faster than the speed of my left hand. Okay? Isn't that better than, okay, everybody pick them up. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. You don't need it. You really don't need it. And if you have that communication and you've really talked about this and you've got those listening skills going on, and go. Another way it could happen, if you wanted to dress it up just a little bit, is the football games when you do the wave?
Yeah.
Well, we're not going to do quite that. But it'll be, it will be kind of a worship wave. And it will start with the C4 ringer and bring up the left hand first, slowly. So we're doing that same slow lift all the way up the row. So it doesn't have the continuity. And as soon as it gets to the top, okay? So you can choose, and I'll choose the worship wave when there are patterns like this in the bass, the LV patterns, because it just kind of sets up the visual for what they are about to see. So 2 options for that you can choose from. Which would you like to do? Second. Back row, what would you like to do?
We'll follow the front row. Whatever they do, we do.
Good answer. Okay.
You got a big
All right.
one.
Yeah.
Okay, so back row, I need to see that you do it as well.
Is
All
there
right.
any doubt?
All right, so we'll come up together doing the worship wave. And then once I get up to position 11, we'll start. All right, here we go.
What are you waiting on him or?
you're always gonna have those ringers that do something they don't expect. Don't show it on your face, because that'll destroy the worship moment, and I'm glad you did that, because it reminded me,
Teaching moment.
yeah, to remind you, and you know, if you do something you don't expect, thumb damp it, put it down, and just
And point at the next person.
That's okay for rehearsal. Get it out of your system and have a light moment. All right, good. Yeah, but become good thespians. Yeah, there is the story of the miracle of the first pew. You know that, the miracle of the first pew? No one sits in the first pew usually. And so if there are any mistakes that come from the bells, any mistakes of any kind, the first pew sucks it up. And he goes
Okay.
no further than the first pew.
I wouldn't have to worry about it.
So pull that out when you need it. And you know, remind your readers that you know this better than anyone else. There's not anyone else in the congregation who has the courage to come up and sight read and do the team building, and they don't know the story that you're about to share. And they're really going to be moved by what they hear you do from this. Okay? And sometimes I'll read a scripture verse, sometimes I'll have text put in the bulletin. There's different ways of setting it up so that they will know what the different verses and transitions mean. That's a whole nother class. All right, let's have worship. I'll try not to sing. Good cover. Good for you. So I apologize. So we are at the is finished chord, and I think I better finish with you there. Thank you for being patient with me, and should have called my attention to that, but yes. So, I hope you make mistakes and things like that.